Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Please forgive my tardiness. I had some last-minute things to deal with. My name is Liliana Bakhtiari. I am your chair, and welcome to the official meeting of Committee on Council. Would like to introduce everyone. To my far left, we are joined by Council President Doug Shipman, followed by Councilmember Jason Dozier, Councilmember Amir Faroqi, Councilmember Jason Winston, my Vice Chair, Councilmember Byron Amos. To my far right, Councilmember Howard Shook, and Councilmember Andrea Boone. This does constitute a quorum, so I would like to first motion to adopt our agenda. Second by Councilmember Faroqi. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, and I should also log into my own computer. Give me one moment. Oh, it's down, that's right, I'm sorry. I should also add that Elms is down, so to add a fun level of, an additional level of suspense, we're gonna be doing voice votes today, so please.
The vote is open. Oh, everyone say aye. Or...
Yes, so please, please say aye if you are an aye. Go ahead, 1, 2, 3, aye. Aye. Any nays? This does carry. So second, we will go to the approval of the minutes. I motion to adopt. Seconded by Councilmember Amos. Ayes? Aye. Any nays? This does carry. Well, today's just going to be a joy. And next we have the 2024, oh yes, the 2024 Committee on Council Goals and Objectives. Again, our goal is the plan is to adopt these at our February 5th meeting, so please send your new recommendations to our new analyst, Mr. Overton over there. And next we have a motion to adopt our full council agenda. I move to approve. Do I have a second? Second. Do the ayes have it? Ayes? Aye. Any nays? So approved. We have public comment next, but really quickly, because since we have a longer public comment, we do have a communication on our agenda of an approval for one of our, for our Commission on Women. I'm gonna go ahead and hear that first before we go into public comment, just so we can get that done. So very quickly.
She is not in attendance today.
Not?
Yeah.
Oh, it's number 2, I apologize. So number 1 is not here. Do we still need to sound off number 1 just, or do you wanna wait until we get to the agenda? We can come back to that. Okay. Mr. Overton, will you go ahead and sound out item number 2?
Absolutely. Item number 2, 24R3106, a resolution by the Committee on Council appointing E. Richard Taylor, the nominee of the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, to serve on the governing board of the Office of the Inspector General for a term of 3 years, to begin on the date of approval of this appointment and for other purposes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Taylor, are you here? Good to see you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you would like to serve, and also thank you for volunteering for this.
Absolutely. Really appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to be here. Think a little bit about my background. I'm an affordable housing developer here, housing for people experiencing homelessness. Very passionate about the community, all the good work that we do here. My background, I've spent time as an investment banker. Went to Vanderbilt, graduated with a master's in finance. Previously went to Clemson, graduated with finance. And when this position opened up, I reached out and I knew it was kind of the perfect position for me, and to take what I'm doing and what I've learned and bring that to City Hall and make sure that I serve ethically and without any bias in any direction. So thank you guys, really appreciate it.
Moved by Councilmember Amos, seconded by Councilmember Shook. Should we just do a roll call vote?
Yes.
Mr. Overton, you want to sound everyone off?
Absolutely. Councilmember Howard Shook. Councilmember Andrea Boone. Chair Bakhtiari.
Aye.
Councilmember Byron Amos. Councilmember Jason Winston. Councilmember Amir Faroqi. And Councilmember Jason Dozier. The motion carries.
Thank you. The ayes have it. So, Mr. Taylor, we're honored to have you. Thank you so much, and welcome. But you have both my congratulations and my condolences, so I appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.
Appreciate
All
it.
right, I guess I'll find out what that means very soon.
You will. Thank you. And that brings us to public comment before we get into our legislative agenda. Just real quickly, in this public comment, everyone has 3 minutes. We don't do a transfer on this, so each person speaking will have 3 minutes. And I will let you know, I will gently whisper into the mic when you have 30 seconds left. Sound good? Okay. So first we have Griffin Price.
Good morning, everyone. First, I wanted to start off with a thank you to my council member, Bakhtiari, for passing the e-bikes referendum for moving our city forward in a way that I personally am in favor of. I am really enthused by that aspect of the democratic process, by having things that I care about being able to be heard by my representative and being able to be passed. And I believe that is what we are speaking about today. If we set aside the politics of what we all know this is about, the referendum that we have before you is also a question of process. When 1/5 of the city speaks up, we need to have a way to have that fifth be heard, have political consequence. This is also why you'll hear people today asking you to pass this amendment without, to pass this movement without amendment. To establish this process, we need to be sure that it won't be rehashed at a future date. We need to create a framework for passing referendums. It is important, I think, in this instance to realize that the people out here feel like they're being excised from this process. We have been met with 6 months of the intentional fog of bureaucracy, the unintentional delays, uncertainty. It has put a barrier between the public and their council people, a barrier that I think you have the ability today to remove. I'm going to yield the rest of my time to these wonderful people out here, and y'all have a good morning.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Miss Jacqueline Eccles, who honestly needs no introduction.
Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Eccles. I am board president of South River Watershed Alliance. And I speak for them, but this morning I'm also speaking to you as a citizen who votes. The issue before you this morning is whether the right of Atlanta citizens to vote on an issue violates the law. Thousands of citizens were purged from the state's voter rolls and prevented from voting in the run-up to the last election. Why? To control who votes and in the end, who wins. Some of you have been swayed by the opinion of the law department, which works solely for and at the discretion of the mayor, that the ordinance in support of the petition and referendum process violates the law. You have also in front of you, I hope, it came out late last night, an opinion from national and local democracy and legal experts that debunk that claim. Citizens don't need for their council to speak for them when they can speak and want to speak for themselves. 116,000 citizens have signed a petition demanding that they be allowed to do just that, speak for themselves. Respect the right and pass the democracy, protection ordinance before you that supports that right. Separate the political from the legal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Eccles. Next, we have Tim Franzen.
Morning, y'all. My name is Tim Franzen. I am the Atlanta Economic Justice Program Director for American Friends Service Committee. I know that in my communications with council over the last week, I too have run into this argument from the legal department. Didn't get to put my eyes on it, but I've spent all weekend grounding myself in a legal analysis around this because I'm not a lawyer. And what has become abundantly clear to me is that the Atlanta Legal Department has once again made a legal argument, they've taken a political argument and tried to make it seem like a legal argument. I mean, bottom line is democracy is at stake here, and Atlanta residents' confidence in y'all is at stake here too. I am not here today to say break the lease, stop Cop City, because today is not about that. Today is about the integrity of our democracy. It's about residents' faith in this process, and it is about the 116,000 people that signed that thing and that are expecting an answer. The consequences of continuing to snuff out any opportunity for a nonviolent political solution to the city's crisis, it creates avenues of change that are outside of this office, and that's not something that I want to see. I want to see a nonviolent political solution, and I believe that a lot of y'all want to see that too. And so one way to take it out of your hands is to support a referendum process that puts it in the hands of regular, everyday people. And so my hope is that you allow this piece of legislation to move through this committee unamended for a vote on full council. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Bennett. Ms. Bennett. I cannot quite read the first name. It looks like Ms. Goetta Bennett. There you go. Did I say it right? Please tell me I did.
Good morning. My name is Joetta.
Joetta.
And I'm here because I do want the referendum taken care of and for the process to go forward. And I'm here also because I want to defend the forest and climate justice, because we need the forest, we need the trees, and we need fresh air. And that will be good in this earth. But it seems to me that there are people that don't want to have fresh air, the clean air, the forests, wherein we can have a healthy earth. And we've been considered, like what Mr. Lamont Hill said, we are casualties of America's war on the vulnerable and beyond. And the forest needs to have life also, and that's beyond the casualties of Americans' war on the vulnerable. And we just need justice every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Edmondson?
Hello. Oops, sorry. My name is Mary Edmondson, and I am here in favor of having people vote against or for Cop City, as another colleague said, to leave it up to the integrity of our democracy. I am here in favor of putting Stop Cop City on the ballot. And as a little bit of, I guess, introduction to myself, my name is Mary. I used to work at the Rockdale House for Men and Women, which was a transitional housing offender reentry program, helping people get out of jails, off the streets, and to a second chance. And I met some incredible people there. One of those people being a woman who also went through the house herself. And when COVID hit, she stayed there for 24 hours for 30 days because she believed that because that house saved her life, that she was going to devote her life to saving others. And that woman goes without retirement and benefits, but Georgia has money for Cop City. My sister, who is a CNA, who works at an adult daycare, and works for $12 an hour and can't afford rent, but we have money for a university to teach police not to shoot at somebody running away 13 times. Georgia seems to have money to militarize its police against its citizens when we advocate against violence, but no funds to combat the poverty that breeds it. We have the money to fund genocide and across the world, but people like my friend that works at the Rockdale House and for my sister who is a CNA can't afford to pay rent. And our police use the same chemical warfare and the same tactics that are used against the Palestinians and to the African Americans here. And just recently, an IOF soldiers wearing keffiyehs were found spraying skunk water on pro-Palestinian protesters at Columbia University, where Columbia University was not held accountable. And skunk water causes a plethora of problems, and now we expect us to be silent when our taxes are used to enable the violence that is used against the marginalized or against our will. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Alex Joseph.
Hello, my name is Alex Joseph. I am a citizen of Atlanta. I live in Councilmember Bakhtiari's district. I voted for them. I'll do so again. I am disappointed to have heard that the ordinance that we are all here to speak in favor of has been rewritten, that signature match has been added to it extensively, but it does not change the comments that I came to deliver. You are all here because of voters. Without the democratic system, you have no power. And if people cease to believe in that system, your power goes away. It is important that referendums in Atlanta, a power that exists in the charter, be allowed to occur. And then it's important that those referendum signatures are handled with care and transparency, because every single person that signs the petition has the right to know why their signature was accepted or rejected. I don't know if any of you have ever worked as a poll worker, but when you have to turn someone away from the polls when they want to vote, it's with a heavy heart. That is someone that's taken time out of their day, they want to exercise their right, and whether it's because they've moved or their license doesn't match their signature, there's a reason. You are careful in that moment to explain the reason. In that the referendum has been reported on, the rhetoric that I've heard has emphasized good signatures and bad signatures. As someone who personally collected over 900 signatures, let me remind you that each and every signature is a person. And the majority of those bad signatures are going to be DeKalb County residents directly impacted by this project. The majority of those, quote, bad signatures are going to be people that weren't registered to vote in the last municipal election, which was a requirement. So when we are talking about good signatures and bad signatures, please remember that these are individuals that believed enough in a system to sign a piece of paper because they wanted the opportunity to vote. And if you take that right away from them and you do so in an untransparent manner, you are sending the message that they have no reason to participate in the democratic process going forward. And if that is the lesson that they learn, then the power that you all have, which comes from voters, will ultimately go away as people turn their backs on this system.
Thank you. Next, we have John Harris.
Question before my comment begins. Am I able to provide something to counselors?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic.
I will come grab it from you.
So
And
I have a
Mark,
copy for each counselor except for Councilmember Amos, who already has received a copy.
Can you make sure, Jasmine, that you start their time once they start speaking?
Thank you so much. Councilors, thank you for giving us the time to speak this morning. It's already been alluded to in Alex Joseph's comments that we do not want any substitutions or amendments to the already very publicly available ordinance that has been introduced into council. It has been reviewed by legal representatives at the local and national level. It is, as you are about to read in the document being handed to you, very much understood to be well within your power and within the letter of the law. When the referendum was originally approved by the clerk, which is someone who works for council, there was the understanding that it would be carried through to the end point. In absence of rules available to actually do that, there is an abdication of your ability to actually carry out this democratic process. That is what we are here to do today, is to codify the ability of you all to do the job you agreed to do when the clerk approved this referendum. Now, I'd like to read in a very particular part of the ordinance that was read into council. This is provision H, and it says that the ordinance shall take effect upon passage and shall apply to any petition review conducted by the municipal clerk of the city, including petitions previously submitted to the municipal clerk but not yet approved or denied by the council as of this ordinance's passage. Now, we all believe that that is a very important part because it does mean that it will codify the rules for the existing referendum and will allow you, again, to do the job you agreed to do when the clerk approved the referendum. There is no question about the legal ramifications of the 11th Circuit for actually codifying these rules. Please, we are begging you, approve these rules as written without substitution or amendment. I personally had the opportunity to speak with Mayor Dickens, shake his hand, and ask him to drop the lawsuits and count the referendum signatures. He told me in a sort of nonsensical way that he would love to, but we don't have the votes. Citing the AJC article that preempted our process of verifying these signatures and concluding without completing the process. Please codify the rules and complete the process so that we can all vote on this and you have to stop hearing from us. Thank you.
Ms. Jan Rivers.
Good morning, esteemed councilors. I'm a citizen of City of Atlanta, live in Kirkwood. Councilmember Bakhtiari is my representative, and the first thing I want you to know is that I came to work early this morning so I could spend a couple minutes speaking with you here. And what I want you to know is that these 116 signatures that were collected, if any one of you had the resources of these citizens and interested parties that were out on the streets, knocking on doors, collecting these signatures, you would all be reelected, no problem. And so this energy and this will of the people that has gone into collecting these signatures to make that will known, that has been turned over to you in good faith. And this process does need to be codified. The signatures need to be accepted. And the underlying real thing that you got to take away from this is that, you know, you're here to do the will of the people. That's why you were elected. And that's what these signatures represents. That's what the ordinance represents, is putting some rules around how these types of things can happen in the future. And I personally collected signatures. I knocked on doors because it matters to me what happens in this city. I want to participate, and all of these 116,000 people that signed want to participate. We want our voices heard, and we want you to listen to us. And that's why we're here today, and that's why we will continue to show up. And all of that energy that went into collecting these signatures, because we want to run our city. We want you to, you know, listen and carry out the will of the people. That's why we're here. And I think I appeal to your good consciences. I appeal to your sense of right and what you know is right. I understand that there are many things that go into politics day to day. I understand that there are many things that interconnect in all of the work that you would do and that you achieve. But at the end of the day, you're here to represent the people that put you in office. And so if you have 116,000 people that are willing to speak up and participate on this issue, just be assured that we're going to be
30
watching
seconds.
very carefully what happens next. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Alina Walker. I have a feeling I said your name incorrectly.
That was me. My name's Elihu Walker. I'm glad
I'm
to be
so
here with
sorry.
you
I
today.
mistook one of the letters. I apologize.
Absolutely fine. Yeah, so, I'm not an expert on coming to speak before councils or anything like that. I've actually never done it before, and I don't really know all the standards and procedures and ordinances that are typically used. I just want to speak from the heart about an issue that has really affected me, and I think people like myself don't really get the airtime to come here and speak to the council that often. So I wanted to represent people who have been formerly incarcerated. I'm an educator. I live here in the city of Atlanta. But I also, when I was a young man, spent 3 years of my life in prison. I now teach college courses inside some of the same jails and prisons where I served time. I know what it's like to lose my right to vote, to be told that I can't cast a vote in the place where I live, to make decisions about the things that are going on in the place where I live. And to be honest, I can't really sit down and just be a quiet citizen and not stand up and say something when someone's trying to tell me they're going to take my right to vote away again. I understand there are certain laws and procedures in place, but at the heart of the matter, Black people in America are 4 times more likely to be able to cast a vote, and that's because our communities are over-policed and under-invested in. And what we're talking about today is disenfranchisement, the police industrial complex, and mass incarceration. Those 2 things make up what's known as the new Jim Crow. That's what's happening right now. And just like we had people who were political moderates in the establishment who stood up against people asserting their right to vote to break that Jim Crow system down, don't be the moderate person standing between the enfranchisement of the people, being able to make our own decisions, and not having Jim Crow 2.0 in the city of Atlanta. We've made so much progress. This city carries the legacy of Martin Luther King and nurtures it. But when those people stood up and proclaimed their right to vote, they were told, no, you're pushing too hard. We need law and order. That's most important. Don't stir the pot. And they were called rabble-rousers and outside agitators. And that's what's happening now. We're living through history now. People are going to remember what happened today when people were fighting back against mass incarceration, and you're sitting in the seats to be able to make those calls. Don't be on the wrong side of that when people look back, like we look back at Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Civil Rights Movement just a couple weeks ago during his birthday.
30 seconds.
I don't have anything to say except for my own experience, being part of that system, going back, teaching people and giving back and trying to bring them up. I was able to turn my life around. But we're going to slap felonies on more and more young Black people who don't have a voice in this city, and the cycle's going to keep going if you allow it to. That's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. This does conclude public comment. So we will move on to our legislative agenda, which takes us to Section H, Communications. Mr. Overton, will you please sound off item number 1?
Item number 1, 24C5003, a communication from Councilmember Jason Dozier of District 4, reappointing Ms. Loretta Craig to serve as a member of the Atlanta Commission on Women. This appointment is for a term of 2 years to begin retroactively on March 4th, 2023, and expire on March 3rd, 2025.
Motion to hold by Councilmember Dozier. I will second that. Would you like to, Mr. Overton, do a roll call vote again?
Absolutely. Starting from left to right, Councilmember Howard Shook, Councilmember Andrea Boone, Chair Bakhtiari,
Aye.
Councilmember Byron Amos, Councilmember Jason Winston, Councilmember Amir Faroki, and Councilmember Jason Dozer.
Thank you. Before moving on to item number 3, I just want to say again, Councilmember Dozier, thank you for bringing up somebody for that nomination for that commission. A reminder to colleagues, this is a commission we are trying to get off the ground. So please, again, a reminder to appoint someone if you have a vacancy, or reappoint or renew your appointment if there's someone there. And Councilmember Dozier, I'll trust that your nomination will be present at the next meeting. Thank you. So moving on to we've already taken care of item number 2. Mr. Overton, can you sound off item number 3?
Item number 3, 24-01000, an ordinance by the Committee on Council to amend the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances, Section 66-2, precinct boundary lines and polling places, by amending the 2017 Precincts and Polling Places Ordinance in Fulton County for precincts 02E, 03E, 03G, 03L, 03M, 03N, 04B, 04F, 04J, 04W, 08G, 08P, 09G, and 09H. Due to facility parking concerns, facility declining usage, precinct location merger, new management and usage not being confirmed, facility undergoing renovations, facility being placed under new management and usage not being confirmed, facility no longer being conducive, and for other purposes.
Thank you. I move to approve this item. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Winston. Please call the vote.
Again, from left to right, Councilmember Shook, Councilmember Boone, Chair Bakhtiari,
Aye.
Councilmember Amos, Councilmember Winston, Councilmember Faroki, Councilmember Dozer.
The ayes have it, so this motion does pass. Before we go on to the next item, item number 4, may I ask, is there a way that we can take that item last, given that item will most likely yield the most debate? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save item number 4 for last. Thank you, Jared. So I'm going to save that item. I'm going to save item number 4 for last. I'm going to move on to item number
10.
Item number 10. So, Mr. Overton, will you please sound that item?
A resolution by item number 10, 23R4243, a resolution by the Committee on Council appointing name to be filled in later to the position of municipal clerk, effective date to be filled in later, and for other purposes.
Thank you. I motion to forward to full council without recommendation. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Dozier. Let's please sound that vote.
From left to right, Councilmember Shook.
He said aye.
Yep. Councilmember Boone, Chair Bakhtiari.
Aye.
Chair Amos. Sorry, Councilmember Amos, my fault. Councilmember Winston.
He's chair sometimes.
Councilmember Faroki. And Councilmember Dozer.
Councilmember Dozier, did you want to? Aye. Thank you. The ayes do have it. And before we move on to the next item, colleagues, we can now sign in, so please do so. You may already have, and I might be the one that's slow, so give me one moment. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Overton, am I right that concludes all of our legislative items except for item number 4?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so let's please take up item number 4. Could you please sound that off?
Yes.
And also, I'm sorry, real quickly, are we going to have the TVs on for this vote before this occurs? If we can please get that up and running as well, because I have a feeling that this will be a vote that we need to have, since we're not doing a roll call vote. So the discussion, I'm certain, will take a moment, so please go ahead and sign off the item.
Absolutely. Item number 4, 24-01007, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari, codifying procedures governing the acceptance, review, and validation of petitions pursuant to populace-led referendum and for other purposes.
Thank you. I motion to approve this item. Do I have a second? Thank you, Councilmember Dozier. Do we have, seconded by Councilmember Dozier, do we have, I'm sorry, Jared, do we enter into discussion at this point? Would you please walk me through? All right, so we do have discussion at this point. Would anyone like to speak on this item? Councilmember Shook.
I'm going to make a substitute motion to bring forward a substitute.
Could you, Jerry, walk me through, or Mr. Urban, could someone walk me through the legislative, what protocol is here? Motion substitute is in order? Okay. Is there a second for Councilmember Shook's motion?
What's the substitute?
Do we have the substitute that can be read, or no? We don't have a copy of the substitute?
Just got it. So
You just received it.
just received it.
I want to make it very clear that my name is not on the substitute. Is that correct?
Sorry, 1 second, just pulling it up.
Sure, go.
Copies are being prepared for the substitute, just so everyone's aware.
Thank you. Okay, just to give some insight into actually what's happening. So we have not seen the copy, and it's not typical that we speak to it until everyone has eyes on it and there is a second, and then we will be able to actually discuss it. So just until that happens, we can all take a breath and enjoy the really fun suspense.
Change the caption too.
Ms. Robinson, I have received approval from the chair to ask you if you could maybe talk about the law department's position on the initial paper while we're waiting on the substitute.
Certainly. Amber A. Robinson, City of Atlanta Department of Law. Following the introduction of the initial paper, the Law Department, as part of its pledge to review all pieces of legislation prior to passage, did a review of the legislation, and it is our opinion, has been intimated that there are some legal infirmities with the current legislation. Specifically, that it conflicts with the procedures in the Georgia Home Rule Act and also provides for some additional constitutional infirmities concerning the setting of jurisdiction of Superior Court in the setting of an appeals process, as well as providing for unconstitutional retroactivity concerning the effective date of the legislation. As to the Home Rule Act, because of the uniformity clause of the Georgia Constitution, the City of Atlanta is prohibited, whether in charter or in ordinance, of passing any legislation which would conflict with state general law. The Georgia Home Rule Act is a general law, and so therefore the city does not have the authority to pass legislation in conflict therewith. There are several provisions of the original legislation which do in fact conflict with the Home Rule Act. Those include random sampling, eliminating signature verification, the provision of an additional 15 days after verification to gather additional signatures, and again, as stated, not in conflict with the Home Rule Act, but unconstitutional nevertheless, the portion concerning judicial review and the portion considering the retroactive effective date.
Ms. Robinson, may I ask, I have a question, just one. Thank you for giving the background.
Of course.
I'm curious as to how you advise, or I guess my question is, in your opinion, how do we move this from not violating state law that allows for application on existing and future referendum?
So, of course, it is in fact the case that the council is able to pass rules governing the review and verification process. Those rules just can't conflict with state law in any manner in the Home Rule Act specifically. So if the council are to pass rules governing the verification process, and no verification process has begun, like there hasn't been one that is started in any way, then the rules, if the legislation is ultimately approved prior to the commencement of any verification process, will be in place for that verification process. But if the process has already begun before the legislation is approved into law, then the legislation cannot govern that ongoing process. But of course, it would apply to any future processes.
Council President, please go ahead.
Special Counsel Robinson, just a couple of follow-up questions. You noted that, in your opinion, the sampling and the did you say the elimination of a signature match? I don't, I'm paraphrasing, but on those two items, can you just elaborate how they conflict, in your opinion, with the Home Rule Act? Does Home Rule Act specifically address either one of those items in its enabling legislation, in its enablement of petitions?
Yes. So first, I do want to correct the record. I did not state that there was the quote elimination of the signature match. There is this. We have not stated that quote signature match, which is a term of art is being employed, so I do want to make that clear. In regards to the random sampling, the Home Rule Act says specifically that in order for a petition to be valid, that like 15% of certain authorized voters must have signed the petition. It does not offer any guidance concerning variation, either plus or minus a certain percentage. The law does not provide for any random sampling procedure, which could mean by definition that less than 15% could be on the petition, and yet and still it would be approved due to the sampling if you don't count all of it, right? You're sampling it, you're doing a percentage, you're doing a standard deviation. It would be possible for that to yield an approved or validated petition that did not meet the threshold as set forth in state law. There are many states that allow for random sampling in these processes. They allow for that specifically in state law. Our state does not. There are states that do not. For example, California does. For example, Ohio does not. Georgia does not. And in states where the state law does not provide for said random sampling, it is incumbent upon those doing a verification process to ensure that the exact number as prescribed by state law of signatures is contained in the petition. In regards to the act of reviewing the signatures, because state law specifically requires that certain signatures be placed on the petition. Signatures are specifically mentioned in the Home Rule Act to ensure, again, that the signatures provided are in fact valid and then equal the requisite number as prescribed by state law. There is a requirement that said signatures be reviewed. Otherwise, the state law should have been silent as to regarding signatures. Because they use that word, it is incumbent upon local governments in employing this process that signatures be reviewed to determine whether or not they are in fact valid, to determine whether or not the exact number required have been submitted.
Council President, do you have a follow-up question, or may I ask one?
Go ahead.
Would it be possible then, if we amended the section H, remove the line that says previously received petitions and change to statistical sampling and of random sampling, does that solve it?
I do apologize, but due to the complexity of this ordinance, I am not going to be able to advise as to whether or not certain line amendments, without reviewing the entire context, would fix any of the constitutional infirmities herein. I would need to have time to review that.
So if we were to theoretically hold the paper instead of putting in a substitution to allow you time, that would be something that that would be an option that would be on the table.
Whether or not to hold the paper or to pass the substitute is the pleasure of the committee.
Understood. So before we move on to looking at the substitute, my other question before we move on is the piece on the 11th Circuit and the preemption. That seems to be one of the main concerns with most of council. The 11th Circuit has not yet issued its order. Its focus is on the propriety of the district court's injunction, not about the referendum petition, not the referendum verification process, correct?
That's correct.
So my question is that we, the city, have not challenged how the city validates referendum processes. Or I'm sorry, the plaintiffs, we are the defendants. The plaintiffs in the case did not challenge how the city validates the referendum process. They challenged the restriction on non-residents circulating those petitions. So I'm confused because these seems to be two different things, but there's still yet a preemption in place.
So At no time did I advise that there is a need not to move forward with any such paper one way or the other due to the 11th Circuit. So I'm not quite sure where that's coming from. What I'm saying is if the 11th Circuit rules and thereafter there is a verification process that commences, currently there is no verification process that has commenced because it is stayed due to the upcoming 11th Circuit decision and the fact that they put in a stay on the district court's injunction. So we have not begun a verification process at this time. All I said was, if we do begin a verification process prior to the approval of this legislation, then this legislation could not affect that ongoing verification process. However, right now there is no ongoing verification process.
Because I suppose that's where I'm confused, because there's an opportunity here to outline if and when this does come out of the court process, we would have there be outlining a process in place because we currently don't have one.
That's right.
So, but currently what you were saying is that can't be included because.
Not what I'm saying.
Sorry,
no.
well, that I'm misunderstanding. I
Okay.
apologize.
So if this were to pass and be approved into law, prior to the commencement of the verification process, then it would apply to the upcoming verification process.
Correct, but
However,
it's
if
tossed
the
out.
verification process begins prior to the approval of this legislation into law,
And
then
so
it will not apply to the ongoing verification process.
is it your opinion right now? So I agree with all of that. Is it your opinion the legislation infers differently? Because my thought would be that if it came out of the court process, that this would be something aligned, that this would have outlined a process in place. But understanding that if the 11th Circuit rules it, throws it out, then this doesn't apply. Does this infer something?
The legislation before you, that is not the substitute, infers that regardless that of the timing of the commencement of the verification process, so let's say the 11th Circuit rules tomorrow, and then the city must immediately commence the verification process. This legislation may not be approved into law at that time. If that happens, then this legislation cannot affect that ongoing verification process. If instead this legislation is in fact approved into law, then subsequently the court orders the verification process to move forward, then the verification process will be subject to this legislation.
Any other questions? I do believe that we have a substitute on the floor. Have my colleagues had an opportunity to read the substitute? All right, so Councilmember Shook has put, I have a second for my motion to approve, but a substitute is in order. No, go ahead, Jared. Correct. So I have made a motion to approve the original legislation. It was seconded by Councilmember Dozier. Councilmember Shook made a motion to introduce a substitute. It has not had a second yet because we did not have an opportunity to look at the legislation. Colleagues have now looked on it. So is there a second for Councilmember Shook? Okay. Back to the original motion of approving this legislation. Guys, come on. Thank you. Let's move through this. Is there any discussion for the paper on the floor? And that's the current original legislation. Councilmember Winston.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've gotten this legislation. I've had a chance to look at it, and I know that, law has inferred about certain things about it. I mean, some of us got this and a substitute very last minute and have been really trying to pore over it. I know for myself, I'm okay with this referendum process starting tomorrow. We could do it, and I don't care. I'm ready for this to be over. I'm ready for us to move on as a city and continue this process. My concern is the legal part of this. And I really want to know what happens from a legal standing if this moves forward. What does the state, what ability do they have after this, if it were to move forward? And so that is something that is still a concern. I know there's a substitute in front of us that changes some of the language. I know there's grumblings about what that means and what that doesn't mean. So I'm not necessarily a no, but I do feel like I need more time to be able to kind of pour over this to make a very informed decision about how we move forward.
Understood. Before we take that up, I have a question for either parliamentarian or staff. It would be possible also to move this forward without recommendations so that there could be time between now and the Committee on Council's standing for there to be a broader discussion. Is that correct?
Yes.
That is correct. Okay. So I just wanted to outline that as a possible solution to gather more time, even though it's not enough time, but it could get us additional time to have increased discussions, because we know that it will be a minute before we get to the COC agenda for full council. But does that conclude?
Also, that being said, if there is a possible abstention, it's because I would need more time to be able to read the substitute, go through any possible amendments to make an informed decision.
Understood.
Thank you.
Councilmember Faroki.
Yeah. I think probably asked most of council, referendum is fine, let's get on with it. But I think that Councilmember Winston's point is a valid one. And I guess a question I have for you, Ms. Robinson, is we're not going to be able to adjudicate the legality of whatever gets passed today. That's for the courts, right? If we were to pass, just for the sake of argument, I'm being hypothetical here, I guess could be realistic, but if we pass Councilmember Bakhtiari's legislation, it is preempted in some way as it's written today. Does it run the risk of being challenged in court to prolong this process where then we can't move forward with the referendum if the 11th Circuit then says you can move forward?
Well, and not wanting to speculate as to what that might cause for timing, I can say that if the city of Atlanta, regardless of the subject, adopts certain procedures or laws that are illegal, not authorized by state law, the city can be caused by outside persons or frankly persons not wishing to take actions that are in violation of state law to not move forward with those procedures. So that happens anytime, there's a issue of certain things being recommended or adopted even into our ordinances. If they are not lawful, then persons would have an opportunity to challenge that. Also, there would be decisions that would have to be made by anybody who is being asked to carry out those acts that are not lawful as to whether or not they themselves would welcome taking on the liability of doing so.
The substitute is drafted, and again, I haven't had a chance to fully digest it. And right now, there's no second, or there was no second to carry it forward here. If it comes back during full council in some form or fashion, it would be helpful if law could speak to why elements of the substitute are adhere to state law in ways that the original legislation does not. No, I mean, it's not before us now. The motion died, right? So, but if it does come back up again during full council, which is a possibility, I think having a more robust conversation as to the differences between the two pieces of legislation will be helpful, I think, for full council and the public as well. I'm just putting it on the table. I'm not asking you a question. I'm not asking you to do it now, but because there's no substitute before us right now. So I'll leave it at
that. Vice Chair Amos.
Yes, thank you, Chairwoman. It's no secret. I am an avid supporter of the public safety training facility, but this conversation has went far beyond that. We have moved into a conversation in the city of Atlanta that should be uncomfortable for everybody because we simply should not be here. I have some unreadiness about what would have been the substitute, and I have some unreadiness about the paper in front of us now. It's disheartening that we simply have not been able to get in a room, figure out how to move this city forward. And I fault myself on that for not being a bigger role in what we need to do. But to move this paper forward attempt to move this paper forward as it is now, I think put it in jeopardy of being able to successfully pass. You did, Arthur, you did talk about holding it for more conversation to take place. I don't know if that'll be your desire. I'm not making that motion, but I do, as I have shared with people over the weekend, have some unreadiness about how it is written now.
And I just want to say I respect that and I appreciate the accountability. I do want to also say that I put forth this paper initially almost a month almost before the break, and then again 2 weeks ago. So there was an opportunity for discussion leading up to this point. And so I also want to make that clear, but I do appreciate everything that was stated. Councilmember Shook.
Well, for the record, I just want to say I have faith in the law department's ability to analyze the paper. And I understand that there may be people who don't like it. There may be people who have different interpretations of the same paragraph. I respect that. I have a couple reasons why I don't think we should punt this forward at this point to full council. One is, I've heard people say, and I take you at your word, that this is a very busy substitute. People want time to further digest it. People might want time to craft amendments or other changes. They're going to want to bounce those changes off the law department. I don't believe Ms. Robinson is going to be any more prepared to do that in an hour and a half from now than she is now, regarding some of the queries that are probably going to come her way. Plus, this and prior councils have always done a really good job in doing committee work in committee and not just punting an unfinished mess to 90 minutes from now. So I would hope at this point, I mean, I'm ready to support the substitute as stated, but I think the second option would be that we hold it here and do our work in committee. I think the rest of our colleagues would appreciate that.
Council President.
Thank you. Just a few items on this. Just for context, I think it's important that we remember the code specifically, as it stands, talks to a petition process. But the code is extremely silent on the validation process around the petitions. And because of that, it puts the clerk, frankly, in a very tough position, because the clerk basically doesn't have guidance from code, doesn't have guidance from council on how to do a validation process. But there has to be some sort of validation process per the state law. As we have heard from law, there is very specifically, you must validate the signatures, they must reach a certain threshold. And so, as I've previously stated, I do think it is very important that council basically solidifies the code. If we're going to have petition processes, which I think we should, then we ought to have a very clear validation process so that there's clarity, so that everybody feels good about the process, and that we as council don't put the clerk in the bad situation. And let me be specific why it's really important. There are lots of things in the code that council doesn't specifically address how it's done. Typically, that's because the administration is the executive branch and we're the legislative branch. But in this particular situation, it's really not for the administration to be driving how a petition is validated, right? It's the clerk. And so I do think, as I've said before publicly, I do think that the council needs to step in and needs to codify how we think validation should be done. I think the other is that the initial guidance that the clerk has given around these petitions has raised an enormous amount of conversation around how to use and how to validate not only the lines, but the role of signatures in that process. And some very thoughtful people who are experts in Georgia have weighed in and said, we think there's a better way. We think the current way is not as good as it should be. We think it could potentially disenfranchise. I think Councilmember Bakhtiari's paper is trying to get at some of those things, is trying to make sure that we have a process, frankly, I don't think that Councilmember Bakhtiari's paper has much of anything to do with this specific petition. I think it's neither here nor there with the specific petition. It is trying to get at both making sure the clerk has clear direction and trying to address some of the very legitimate questions around the use of signatures in the validation process. And so I would hope if the committee is not comfortable putting it forward, that the committee would continue to work on this, because I do think there is a hole in the code, as has been shown in this whole process, when it comes to a validation process that everybody can feel good about and that we don't put the clerk in a bad position. And I think that the substitute, I don't think effectively does that. So I would hope that the work would continue if you all are not comfortable going forward with Councilmember Bakhtiari's paper.
Thank you, Council President. I'll be very honest. I don't believe, as the author of this paper, it is my job to also count the votes. I don't believe I have them. I'm going to be very transparent with you all because you came out here today. Now, I am willing to make a motion to hold, but before I do that, there are some pieces I would like to go through that I just would like more clarity about as we have the opportunity to discuss them here as a body with the public for the sake of transparency. So there is a point. Thank you for your pausing. So there is a point here. I want to say the piece on the Home Rule Act, and again, I am not a lawyer. I think so I just have some clarifying questions. So the piece on the Home Rule Act, I'm confused about the statistical sampling. I don't believe that it is preempted. Maybe I am, there is some confusion on that, but I was hoping that you could, that law could elaborate on that piece, the statistical sampling in relation to Home Rule Act, because I don't believe that it is in violation. So I was hoping you could speak to that a bit.
Certainly. The Home Rule Act provides that for municipalities of our size, a certain percentage of the eligible voters as defined by the Home Rule Act must sign the petition. If that number of persons signs the petition and those are valid signatures, then the petition should be validated. If less than that number signs the petition, then it is not validated. The Home Rule Act does not provide that it'll be sufficient to have a validated petition if within a certain standard deviation of that number is provided. If you use random sampling, it would be possible that the number needed for validation was actually on the petition, but due to the sample, it didn't show that the number needed was there. And so under a random sampling as proposed here, if enough signatures were on the petition, but the sampling didn't show it, it would fail. And even though the petition should have been validated and should have moved forward pursuant to state law, it would fail due to the sampling. In the same respect, if a petition that did not meet the threshold went forward, but due to the sampling showed that the sampling indicated that enough signatures were on the petition, but yet and still enough signatures were not actually on the petition, it would be approved even though it violated state law by not having enough signatures. It is correct. There are jurisdictions that have referendum processes that utilize random sampling, but those jurisdictions have that in their state law as saying that within using this particular random sampling process within plus or minus percentage of the number you need to have, that will be sufficient. It's in their state laws. It is not in ours. Ours requires an exact number either to be reached or missed. And if it's reached, it doesn't, then the petition should be valid. And if it is missed, then it is not. And it doesn't matter if within a certain deviation or percentage, sampling would indicate that that number is there. The requirement on us is to count every last signature to determine if that exact threshold is exceeded or missed. We do not have the ability to do it within certain statistical probability.
Okay, so Understood. My experience was, or my understanding, my very basic understanding is that statistical sampling is common in other jurisdictions because it limits cost of verification and properly reflects the goal of the petition process. But taken to note everything you said, so we'll digest that. The piece on signature verification was my understanding that Georgia law does not require signature verification, and that is something that concerned me about the substitution I set my eyes on about 5 seconds ago. So I was hoping you could also talk to that piece.
Yes, again, state law requires specifically that a certain number of signatures of certain registered eligible voters as defined in the Home Rule Act appear on the petition.
God, hey, it's okay. I got it. I promise.
To be clear, I am absolutely not talking about exact match.
Yes, I understand.
Yes.
Yep.
So it requires that certain number of signatures of eligible voters as set forth and defined in the Home Rule Act appear on the petition. If state law did not intend for the signatures to matter, it would not require signatures. So because it states that we must confirm that signatures of the eligible voters as defined by the Home Rule Act appear on the petition in the number that are required in order to validate the petition, then we are required to review those signatures.
Okay. Okay. I appreciate, thank you, Ms. Robinson, for everything. So it's my understanding that my colleagues want time to better deliberate so they feel more comfortable. I want to again state that I circulated this legislation 2 weeks ago. I am more than happy to meet and to have this conversation. There's been concerns about what the state can hold against us and hold us accountable to. I am not in the practice of bending to the state when it comes to sacrificing the voices of my constituency. So the fact that we have a state that in response to an unprecedented referendum that engaged over 100,000 people, and I will not hear this ridiculousness about them being outsiders because that process was started by Atlantans and carried out by Atlantans and signed by Atlantans. So over 100,000 people did not converge in Georgia from outside of the state and city. That is absolutely ludicrous. Now, that being said, in direct response to that, we have a state that wants to make it illegal for petition processes to be carried out in municipal elections or in municipalities. So to be very clear, while we know that that is happening and is no secret, that should not be something that intimidates us because any violation of voter rights and increased voter suppression is insane and imperfect as direct democracy is. It has become a last line of defense. So that being said, I will happily engage. I'm making myself available before we come back to full council. That being said, I will be bringing this back up again. So meet with me, have conversations, let us work this out. And this is not directed at legal because you have been available at all points, so I appreciate you very much. But to my colleagues, please meet with me. Let's have this conversation. And I appreciate Councilmember Shook presenting his substitution, but what I ask of anybody else who plans to author any substitution, I am available. The next time a substitution is made without talking to the author first, and I believe this person knows exactly who they are, we will have a major issue. I have made myself available. I have worked. I have carried the water on this to carry forward any substitution without communicating directly to the author who has taken this on. And the desire to protect this city, despite what people say, this is not for attention. It's because I love the city and I have been an organizer. I've come from the outside and I still know what it looks like to look from the outside in, and I am concerned about increased violence. That is why I've taken this on. If you have direct issues, speak to me directly about it because I have done nothing but make myself available. So you have a substitution you want to bring to me, I am here, but please do not do me the dishonor and the disrespect of introducing it 5 seconds before we come into this meeting. And that is, I want to be very clear, that is not directed at my colleague. So thank you. I move to hold. Do I have a second? Second. Seconded by a lot of people. Seconded by Councilmember Winston. And please let us take that vote.
The vote is open.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The ayes have it. This is held, and we will take this back up again at our next meeting. Thank you. We are adjourned.